Good afternoon, everyone. It's 2 o'clock. We're going to call the meeting of the Board of Supervisors back to order, and we'll take up two items. We're on item number 22A. This is the appeal of a special use permit for multifamily dwelling on property zone RO, located at 812 North Division Street. Who's doing this? Ms. Pansky, are you doing it, or Lee? You? Hi, Susan. Go.
Hi, thank you. For the record, Susan Dorr-Pansky, Planning Manager. This is an appeal of a Planning Commission approval of a special use permit for an 8-unit multifamily dwelling at the property located at 812 North Division Street in the residential office zoning district. The applicant, subject to the original application, is Herman Bauer. He and his representatives are in the audience today. The appellants, Alexander Kirsch and Basil Slaughter, are also in the audience today. The subject property is located on Ann Street between Division Street and North Minnesota. It's the vacant lot that you see in this aerial here. Some of the surrounding uses that are important to note as we talk about the proposed use today are duplexes to the north and office use as well. To the south, single-family residences and offices. To the east, offices and some single-family residential that's not noted on this slide. And then to the west, single-family, a residence with daycare, and 2 multifamily units, uses, one a 6-plex and the other a triplex. As you probably remember, this project has quite a long history, so I'm going to quickly go through it and bring everyone up to speed on where we've been and where we're going with this today. In 2011, a project that was somewhat similar to what's being presented today in its density only was presented to the Historic Resources Commission and the Planning Commission, again for 8 units. It was approved by both. The approval was appealed by the same appellant that is appealing this project today. It was heard by the board in 2011 and ultimately sent back to the Planning Commission for further review. The applicant at that time chose to not proceed with going back in front of the Planning Commission and chose instead to modify the project to 2 duplex buildings for a total of 4 units instead of 8, which is allowed outright in the residential office zoning district. They did receive Historic Resources Commission approval of that revised design, and that included a landscape plan that the HRC also approved. In 2013, the applicant demolished the existing buildings on the site, which they did have approval from the Historic Resources Commission to do. And with that, removed several historic trees that were represented to remain on the property with the landscape plan that had been previously approved. As surrounding residents notified the planning division of this. As a result of that, the job was red tagged, and the planning division required that the applicant go in front of the Historic Resources Commission to present a new landscape plan. They did that in October of 13, and it was ultimately approved. In 2014, the applicant decided to modify the plan from the 2 duplexes that he previously had approved for 4 units to 2 4-plex units for a total of 8. But what's important to note is that this modification was to basically a density modification within the same building footprint that was approved by the Historic Resources Commission. That application was heard by the Planning Commission because 8 units is a multifamily use. It does require a special use permit. The Planning Commission heard it and approved it, and that's the application that is being appealed to you today. I'll note that Historic Resources Commission has not reheard this application yet, and the reason for that is because if the special use permit is not approved, then there's no reason for Historic Resources Commission to rehear it because the applicant will revert back to their original approval of the duplexes.
I guess I don't understand that one. Help me do our rules require HRC approval before it comes back up or not?
We don't have a specific timeline on which happens first.
Okay.
So before I move on to describing the project and what is being proposed today, I'd like to note for the record and make it very clear that we're really dealing with two issues here. One is the special use permit that deals with the density and the multifamily use, and the other is the historic district. Several of the appellant's arguments in their letter deal with the historic district and the nature of the historic district and this project's compatibility. And while I appreciate those points that were brought up, they're not relevant to the density and the use of the land. So I want to be very clear that those are two separate issues. So I would encourage the board, as you're considering this appeal, that anything related to the historic district is really more appropriately heard by the Historic Resources Commission. And if the Historic Resources Commission renders an approval that the applicant or the appellant does not like, then they can appeal that to the board as well. But a special use permit for zoning in the historic district is a separate issue from the historic nature itself. Historic Resources Commission is there to regulate the site design and the architecture of buildings. They do not regulate the use of the land, which is why we have a separate zoning district in addition to the historic district overlay. So the first slide that I have here is one of the two proposed fourplexes. This is in the current application. This is basically what is currently approved by the Historic Resources Commission. What the applicant did was they took the existing building footprint and layout, and instead of having two-bedroom units, they have 4 one-bedroom units. This is the architecture that was essentially approved by Historic Resources Commission. There are some minor modifications that would need to be made that HRC would need to approve, the addition of a door, modification of some garage doors, and then site revisions related to parking and landscaping. This slide shows the current site plan with proposed parking, and the shaded areas are the footprints of the buildings. A couple things that I'd like to note. Again, the footprint that these 4 units in each building are being proposed in are exactly, with slight modifications, essentially identical to what has been approved by Historic Resources Commission previously. A significant modification from the duplex project to what's being proposed today with the 8 units is parking. What you'll see in this slide is parking for 12 units, or I'm sorry, 12 cars. The parking that is required per Carson City Municipal Code is 2 spaces per unit. And so for a project like this with 8 units, it would theoretically be 16. However, there is a provision in the code that allows for flexibility that can be reviewed by the director and/or the planning commission that basically says that if the applicant provides accredited information, for example, the ITE manual, the Institute of Traffic Engineers parking manual, that supports their argument for reduced parking, then we can consider that and approve it at staff level or ask that the Planning Commission approve it. In this case, because we knew there was a special use permit on this property that needed to move forward, we asked the Planning Commission to approve reduced parking. The applicant hired a traffic engineer that provided a parking analysis that's in your packet that referenced the ITE manual and a reduction in parking that was actually to 1.2 spaces per unit for a total of 10. However, staff really felt like we would prefer to have a little bit more site guest parking on site. So we proposed 1.5 spaces per unit for a total of 12, and that's what you see here today. 4 of the spaces are within the buildings in garages, and 8 of the spaces are outside. This next slide.
Susan, before you go on,
Yes.
just a quick question. The 4 parking spaces that are inside the buildings, a lot of times garages get filled up with personal items, personal property. If that were to be the case, then is there any ability for those 4 cars to park on site, or would they then go to street parking?
They would go to on-street parking, and Thank you for bringing that up. And they could go in the driveway as well. The driveways are long enough to allow that. But I'm glad you brought that up because it brings up a point that I didn't mention. Part of the reason why staff felt that it was appropriate to approve reduced parking on the site is because this is in an area of Carson City where on-street parking is very common and readily available. So in addition to the on-site parking, there is on-street parking available as well. So the next slide shows open space that's proposed with the project, and this was something that was brought up in the appellant's letter about whether or not the applicant had demonstrated if adequate open space had been provided. This is also significantly different from what was originally appealed in 2011, and I'll show that to you in a minute. But the dark green shows what the applicant originally approved, which is 1,017 square feet per building. Each unit requires 250 square feet. So in this example that's showing the one building on the left, 1,000 square feet of open space would be required. The applicant provided 1,017 in the dark green shaded area. The light green shaded area, however, is additional open space that the applicant could have used in their calculation but chose not to demonstrate that they had provided more than enough open space for this project. The addition of that lighter shaded green is another, I think, roughly 1,300 square feet beyond the initial 1,000, which more than doubles the minimum requirement per unit. Another thing that the appellant brought up in the letter was related to the landscape plan. This is the currently approved landscape plan for the duplex project. This is the plan that was approved after the historic trees were removed. It's approved just for the one side, the duplex on the Minnesota and Ann corner only. Staff recognizes and agrees with the appellant that this landscape plan does need to be modified for the Historic Resources Commission to look at again. It also needs to comply with Carson City Development Standards, Division 3 landscaping, and we have put conditions of approval in the Planning Commission staff report that were approved by the Planning Commission to address that. But essentially, just quickly, some of the things that are going to change. You might recall, I think it was 2 months ago, I was here in front of the board asking for an extension on a right-of-way abandonment for this property. The right-of-way is all of this out here. They will be modifying that, so the right-of-way line will be out a little bit further, which allows this building to move out towards Ann and Minnesota further and accommodates more parking to the sides. So landscaping in the front will need to be modified, landscaping on the sides will be modified. And while I didn't ask for this in the approval of the duplex, I will be asking for the applicant as a part of Historic Resources Commission approval to provide landscaping for the entire site, not just half of it, because there are some historic trees that were not removed right here in this corner, and the appellant would like for that to be addressed, and I believe Historic Resources Commission would like that to be addressed as well. In addition to the landscaping, Historic Resources Commission, as I mentioned, will also be reviewing modifications to the building to accommodate the 4 units instead of 2. They will also review possible locations for HVAC units, location for trash storage, the trash enclosure. All of that is typically addressed at design level rather than the special use permit level. However, because this project is subject to Historic Resources Commission review, it's appropriate for them to look at that as well as it relates to this project. So before I wrap up, I just wanted to refresh everyone's memory about what this project looked like in its 2011 form. This is the project that was appealed and ultimately sent back to the Planning Commission. Also has 8 units. This shows 16 parking spaces, which complies with code as it currently stands. The blue is the building footprint, and then the green is the open space. You can see the footprints are larger, the open space is much smaller, and also a lot more broken up, and not really useful for open space activities, recreation activities, typical things that would happen as associated with a residential use. I believe, while I wasn't here in 2011 during this item, I believe that those were some of the issues that were brought up by the board and have since been modified to be addressed. This is what the original elevation looked like. You can see it's the form and massing of this building is quite a bit larger and definitely looks like a multifamily building, whereas the currently proposed building looks more like a single-family use that is more compatible with some of the residential uses in the area. But on the flip side of that, I will note that there are multiple office and multifamily uses that are in the vicinity of this as well. This is just another picture of the elevation that was 2011. This is the parking area. So I'm going to end on the proposed site plan and note that my very specific responses to the appellant's letter are in the staff report. I'm sure you've read them all. We are recommending that the board uphold the Planning Commission's approval. The project, we feel, because it's located in a transitioning mixed-use area, is appropriate, and it is compatible with the surrounding uses. As I mentioned, the appellants and the applicant are here today, and happy to answer any questions and also make presentations. But before that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
We have any questions of Susan? Because I think the next step is we'll take the appellant to talk about, the reason for the appellant, then we'll hear from the applicant, and then if the appellant wants to take anything up that was said, then we'll hear that. So the appellant will get a couple of shots. We'll get it worked out here. And for everybody, the public that's out there, we usually take public testimony, but this is not one of those ones where we do. This is the appellants and the applicant. So, if you live in that neighborhood, you're part of this. You're part of the appellant, so, okay? All right. Who wants to lead off?
Good afternoon, all. My name is Alexander Kirsch, and I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all today. And I wish to submit a packet for each of the board members, including the record keeper, who that may be.
I guess here's the deal. I mean, would be happy to. One, I kind of want you to stay within the, Joe, you tell me if I'm wrong, but I want you to kind of stay within the confines of what was before the Planning Commission, okay? So that we're not, giving anybody any unfair shot. So we want to hear what happened at the Planning Commission. So try not go out and raise additional arguments or things like that other than what was at the Planning Commission. Two, the stuff, the documents you've handed out, if you reference them, we'll make them part of the record. But just please be cautious of, not trying to create a different record than what was before the Planning Commission, all right?
Yes,
Okay,
I understand the rules.
Is that okay, Joe, or not?
Joe Ward from the DA's office. Perhaps also within the confines of the record that this body is confined to, with this additional information, which is outside the record, perhaps you could provide a courtesy copy to the applicant.
Yes, I could definitely do that at a later point in time. It is only reference I already stated. It's just something to look at, basically. And I will talk about each of the details I'll bring up today.
Well, let's see where it goes. And we're not trying to be overly legalistic about it, but on the other hand, it's been up and down once or twice, and kind of got to watch that. So,
Yes, I understand.
All right.
I may have one more thing. These are originals, And these would probably go into the record. You have copies of all that material, but I will mention it further. Again, good afternoon all, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Alexander Kirsch, and I'm co-appellant to protest the issuance of permit number SUP 14036. A number of objections and concerns were presented in the official appeal. Today, I and our supporters will highlight the most cogent points and present additional evidence to refute the approval of F4 SUP 14036 and give merit to our recommendation for reversion of the current tentative planning department approval back to the decision made by this Board of Supervisors on September 15th, 2011. I note again that this appeal should not be necessary because a compromise had already been reached in 2012-2013, wherein Mr. Bauer downsized his project to a pair of duplex apartments, 4 dwelling units, which action was approved by the Planning Division. We again are here today, however, because Mr. Bauer is attempting once again to build a complex found previously out of scale and inappropriate for Carson City's historic district. The fact that Mr. Bauer did not adhere to previously agreed to modified building plans when submitting these new plans appeared to be a calculated attempt to get his original request approved after all, without consideration of the city, the residents of the historic district, or this Board of Supervisors. Conditions have not been static, however, since the previously submitted proposal was modified. The current quadplex, 2-building project could not have been formulated or approved had not Mr. Bauer illegally removed 950-year-old fruit trees from the property in late 2013. Remnants.
Can I ask you there, I mean, and board members feel free, were those trees to be removed in the under the agreement that was, where there was the duplexes?
No, they were supposed to be standing, and I might add that 5 or 4 trees cut down were at that time on public property. Since the everything was agreed upon, we came to an agreement, as I said, forth. Those trees were remnants, by the way, of the historic Treadway Orchard. Here are the relevant provisions of the Carson City Municipal Code for the preservation and protection of existing trees and shrubs in Section 3.4. Section 3.4.1 provides for planting of new trees on both private and public land in cases where existing trees have been removed from a building site without prior written permission from the Planning Department. Without such written permission, and contrary to the prior landscape plan for his new construction of 2 duplex units, Mr. Bauer and his contractors removed a number of historic trees from the historic district property and city property during the initial construction phases of his property. Although Mr. Bauer provided some revised landscape plans in 2013 for the construction of 2 duplex units, he has failed to provide any landscape plans and obtain necessary formal approvals in 2014 for the proposed construction of his new design, 2 quadplex units, as clearly required by sections 3.4, 3.4.1, 3.4.1.1, 3.4.2, and 3.4.3 of the Carson City Municipal Code. To date, Herman Bauer, his architect, and subcontractors have essentially ignored key provisions of the Carson City Municipal Code relating to the preservation and existing trees and shrubs, as well as required corrective measures required when building mistakes are made. Their gross violations of required procedures and lack of adherence to city regulations in this area are especially egregious given the location of the proposed buildings in Carson City's historic district and prior public discussions and guidance given to Mr. Bauer from the Board of Supervisors in the Historic Resources Commission on this topic. At this point, and prior to any further discussion of Mr. Bauer's construction project, we request that Mr. Bauer submit a comprehensive landscape plan, including parking for a minimum of 2 vehicles per dwelling unit, as required by Carson City's municipal code for any new construction, as well as on-site trash storage and temporary snow storage for his currently proposed dual quadplex units, total of 8 dwelling units on a small parcel of land, and that both the Historic Resources Commission and the Planning Department provide written reviews and written opinions concerning a completely new landscape plan for this property. Since it is unlikely that Mr. Bauer and his designers can mitigate the previous destruction of a number of mature and historic fruit trees solely on a small property, we also request that Mr. Bauer submit a mitigation plan that includes the planting of new large caliper trees on public land, as required by Carson City Municipal Code 3.4.1.1, Section C. Mr. Bauer's new proposal also could not have been approved if the Planning Commission had not acceded to accept a parking allowance of only 1.5 rather than required 2 vehicles per household, in contravention of Carson City's municipal code, based upon his privately funded urban traffic study utilizing woefully outdated and inappropriate parking survey data, none of which was obtained from the Nevada urban or suburban areas. The current city code requirement of providing 2 on-site parking spaces per dwelling unit is bolstered by 2010 U.S. Census data showing the average number of owned vehicles for a 2-person family in zip code 89703 is 2.3 vehicles per dwelling unit, not the 1.2 vehicles that Mr. Bauer consultants cited with no supporting data or justification other than their status as traffic engineers or consultants. Once again, Mr. Bauer gave no consideration for sufficient open space for snow removal space along of one of the busiest streets within the historic district. Mr. Bauer's new proposal raises serious safety issues, especially for cars backing out of driveways that back out onto Division Street with several curb cut-throughs directly onto a busy snow removal route, and a bus route, I might add. Once again, Mr. Herman Bauer has not given any consideration to the indication provided for any air conditioning units, as well as necessary private or common storage spaces in his apartment complex plans. Preliminary plans provided to date do not even show where central heating systems within the building would be located to provide heat for 8 dwelling units. During the first appeal process on September 15, 2011, a number of property owners within the historic district proximal to the project were surveyed, and a substantial signature list of parties opposing this project was compiled and submitted to this board. Such a list is submitted again today. More than 80 signatures of property owners within the historic district were submitted in 2011, and 68 signatures of district residents are submitted today. Nevada public meeting notification requirements for public discussion of this special use permit do not appear to have been met. Per Carson City Recorder's document 444933, recorded and dated June 6, 2014, ownership of a property, 801 North Minnesota Street, Carson City, located on the same city block as Mr. Bauer's property, was changed to Brenda L. Dahlquist. She's present to date, and that was submitted on that date. However, despite this change having been made more than 30 days earlier in city records, and Mrs. Dahlquist receiving a new assessor's tax statement for the property that was denied July 1st, 2014, the new owner was not notified of the planned public discussion of Mr. Bauer's special use permit application and the Planning Department notice that was mailed out on July 10th, 2014. Based on this information, we suggest the Planning Department use ownership records that are obtained directly from the City Recorder's Office when ownership changes, and not the Assessor's Office as per current practice. In consideration to the above points, we request that the approval of the current proposal of SUP 14036 be rescinded and the proposal now be denied. If Mr. Bauer still wishes to develop his property, he should be required to adhere to the February 9, 2012 revised development plan for a maximum of two-family dwelling or duplex units for a total of 4 dwelling units, as approved by the Planning Division, Historic Resources Commission, and supported by a number of property owners within the Historic District, who are all present today, or a large number is. Since Mr. Bauer's construction plans and timetable still appear to be in a state of change, we also request that any building constructed be sided with wood clapboard siding in character with many historic district homes. Mr. Bauer could also propose a development of even smaller scale, if in conformance with Carson City Municipal Code and the HRC requirements. Our neighbors and we find that these reasons to deny the proposed project thoughtful and compelling. Your denial of application SUP 14036 will ensure the character and integrity of our neighborhood and the Carson City nationally recognized historic district will be protected. Denial of the SUP of this large apartment project, as proposed, will also send a strong message to other developers that they must abide by existing property zoning, Carson City Municipal Code requirements, and planning, as well as Historic Resource Commission's approvals. Rather than moving forward with progressive and consistent regulations for the projection of the values of the historic district, we appear to be on a merry-go-round with selfish out-of-state interests hoping to cash in on wearing down public servants with multiple variations of the same project. Who profits from this thinly veiled new proposal? Certainly not the city, and certainly not the residents of the historic district. Should it not be the city as a whole, with its established and nationally promoted historic district and its residents, rather than an out-of-state developer who seemingly flaunts city and historic district regulations and ordinances? We should all be reminded today of the fact that since the establishment of Carson City's historic district in 1982, no apartment project of this size has ever been approved. Mr. Bauer should be content with the 2012 approval of his better designed 2-bedroom, 2-bath duplex buildings with parking for 4 dwelling units and 8 vehicles. We of the historic district say no to the approval of SUP 14036. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me ask you a question. On the removal of the trees, the Historic Resource Commission met and approved a revised landscaping plan in October 2013?
Yes.
That was after the trees had been taken down?
Yes, we came to an agreement even after that.
Okay, help me understand then how the removal of the trees affects this particular this particular plan before us today. Because I understood you to say, you know what, there should be a penalty for the removal of the trees, and I'm having difficulty understanding how that penalty should not have applied, or if it was mitigated or exonerated in October of 2013, just with respect to the removal of trees.
This proposal, as it is today, would not be possible weren't those trees removed. And it was actually prior to the right-of-way of abandonment that this tree cutting down took place. Mr. Herman Bauer chose to go against his own plans, virtually, to make room for this project as it stands today and is proposed today. And I think that has a huge impact, actually, because without prior removal of these trees, he would not meet the open space requirements, no snow removal requirements, which weren't even addressed in any of the new plans. We had discussions about all these in the past at previous hearings. Storage and open space requirements yeah, for an apartment complex within that size.
Okay. Gotcha, Alex. Okay, thank you. Other
Any other
public
questions? maybe?
I don't know if there are or not, but go.
Refresh my memory, because I remember a lot of these people being in the room not liking the previous project either. So I'm not clear as to why all of a sudden the previous project seems better than this project when the amount of open space is increased versus the previous project. Clarify, if you would.
It is only possible with the parking change or the parking allowance change within, or actually changing city ordinance. It is clearly required per dwelling unit of 2 cars per dwelling unit. Mr. Herman Bauer did, attempt to submit a parking study showing only 1.2 cars were necessary. But city census of a much more recent date actually show that the average ownership of cars or vehicles would be 2.3. I own 3 vehicles. My next door neighbor, my co-appellant, owns 3 vehicles. That's just, a short example. Another big supporter has 17 vehicles. So it is more appropriate to go with a 2 parking space requirement than the 1.5. It's more realistic. I don't know of anybody, any couple, who would actually share 1 vehicle. Everybody has their own car to get to work, and that's why only a few supporters of my appeal are present here today. But I would also like to mention that the people who did show up today should have the opportunity to speak at least a short sentence to this effect.
I didn't mean to say they couldn't. I mean, it's your appeal, and I just want to make sure that we kind of stay within the confines of what the record is and, why you think the Planning Commission erred, and we'll go from there. I'm getting there.
Well, it would have tremendous effects on future developments within the Carson City Historic District. I've been a resident of the Historic District for 30 years, since the inception of Carson City's Historic District since 1982. And I've seen the changes, and the changes are for the better. Everyone I talk to, and I don't have one person virtually, supporting this project as it is today. The majority of people I talk to stand for retaining the character and the necessity for a Carson City's historic district. It is nationally recognized. His building project could be proposed outside of the historic district without question, and even a building proposal within scale and within city ordinances should be approved. I'm all for private ownership and development in that nature, but it has to conform to existing rules and regulations. And this was not the case here today or in the past with the approval of SUP 14036.
Jim, go.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
This information that you gave us in this package, was this submitted to the Planning Commission?
Yes, it was outlined within the planning. Okay, yes, it was. It was outlined within the original appeal, and that's why we're talking today about this.
Excuse me, when was the original appeal?
The original appeal was back in 2011.
Okay, so that's when this package was submitted?
No.
Okay.
No.
When was this package submitted that you gave us today?
You have just the reference of my talking points today. So essentially it was submitted today. Excuse my untimeliness in this regard. I recently came back from vacation and I had to, get all this information together on a short notice. However, I might add that the Planning Commission's website or supporting documents only show a partial of the original signature list supplied in 2012, I believe it was. We counted 80, and I submitted the originals to the recorder then, and I think only 11 of these are displayed. Again, today I brought new signatures in a total of 68. So, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Would staff or could staff address the Historical Society, the HRC, is not part of the need, we don't need their approval to get this special permit. Is that what I understood correctly in your beginning?
Yes, that's correct, Supervisor Shirk. This is a special use permit which is related to the zoning code, specifically applied to the residential office zoning district where multifamily dwellings are allowed as a conditional use. The Historic Resources Commission, their job is to regulate architecture and site design only, not land use like a multifamily dwelling unit.
So if this board, just suppose this board approved this, does this go to the HRC for their approval?
Yes, it will. After the decision is made today, it does need to go forward to the Historic Resources Commission for approval again in its revised form. However, it is substantially in compliance with the current approval for the duplexes today. But the modifications that need to be approved will be related to the landscaping, related to the parking, and to minor changes in the building exterior.
Is there a reason it goes here first and then to the historic? Why didn't it go there first and here second? I'm just asking.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk more generally about the process. Yes, generally, we take it to the advisory boards beforehand, which was done in the past with this, to get the recommendation. And in historic district, it's usually the historic district. However, as she just said, in this case, the form of the buildings that the Historic Resource Commission typically review is in significant, is just substantially the same as what they reviewed before. And as she said also, so we didn't feel it was absolutely necessary that they provide those architectural details for this. And the applicant chose to process it through the special use permit first in this case, and we felt that was appropriate in this particular case. So yes, typically it would go to the advisory bodies first. This one has, in a sense, not this project exactly as is, but it has been before HRC.
But it's been before HRC, but it was a different project that was given to them. Now we're going to approve this, and then it'll go to the HRC after we're approval, whereas before, it went the opposite way.
Correct.
It's been before HRC in a form very similar to this. Essentially, what you're approving, which is the substantial change in this project, is the density only. The minor modifications Historic Resources Commission will hear are just that. They're minor in comparison to the overall approval that the applicant currently has.
And I hate to labor on this, but if the trees were not removed, this project could not be submitted. Is that correct?
No. The applicant can submit it, and if the trees were there, could have submitted it with a request to remove the trees with a revised landscape plan. And the HRC would review that. However, that's not the case that we have today.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. But HRC, Susan, has HRC approved the landscaping plan for this, the eight units as opposed to the duplexes?
They have not. They've
Okay.
only approved it related to the duplexes.
So are you saying then that the landscaping plan that was with the duplexes could be flipped to this project almost without significant change?
I believe it can, yes. There will be some modifications related to the location of the building and modifications due to some additional impervious surface that before was landscape area. But I believe they will still be in substantial compliance with what was originally submitted and approved by the HRC.
I want to, generally on the timing also, I want to add to this on the landscape plan. So if this was, we're talking about HRC review of a landscape plan, and if we weren't talking about that, we wouldn't be talking about a landscape plan at all, about having, you approving a landscape plan at all about as part of this approval. Typically, a special use permit for multifamily, they do not prepare a landscape plan at this level of review. A landscape
Correct,
plan
but
comes
Lee,
for approval with building
I don't mean
permits.
to interrupt you there. I agree with you there, but in this situation where you're in the historic district, isn't it true that the landscape plan affects what you can do in terms of density?
Yes.
No,
I mean, it does
landscape,
from
no, density is not controlled by the landscape plan. The land use issue is the density and compatibility with the surrounding properties. Open space is an issue that's specifically, the amount of open space provided, of landscaping provided, the amount of it is part of the review for multifamily. So they have to provide a certain amount of area of landscaping for the density, which this project has demonstrated it does.
Lee, maybe this will clarify it. My understanding of the code is that the landscaping plan could affect the buildable footprint, but not the density therein. Is that correct?
No, the building footprint affects the landscape. I guess depends on how you want to put that around, but for any building footprint, no, in fact, for multifamily, it has nothing to do with the footprint. It has to do with the number of units. As she said, it's a square footage of landscaping per unit that is required. So, and as long as that's provided,
But I think
so there's a limit, obviously, to any given parcel as to how much density you can get and still provide the required landscaping, open space, and parking.
Right, but under the special use permit, we're just talking about density, where under the Historic Resource Commission, they could determine that this number or the footprint of the building pads could be reduced based on the amount of open space that would be required. So there are two different issues by two different jurisdictions.
There is not an open space amount standard for the HRC. They're looking at the character of the landscaping. So they're going to look at the type of trees that go in and where they go in and that detail. Not discussing the amount of landscaping that's required with a certain given number of units.
Okay, well, let me ask you. I don't mean to get theoretical here, but suppose you got historic trees all the way around the property, and the only thing you've got left is in the middle is room for, call it one duplex, one 1,200 square foot home, duplex home with structure, okay? Can you then go in and say, okay, you're going to leave all those trees there, but the applicant can build a basement for parking and can go up 3 stories? Can you do that?
If that's within the height requirements and density, you could do that.
I guess, I'm having a little bit of difficulty understanding, and I got you, that there are 2 different jurisdictions, but I mean, where you've got landscaping, the HRC could theoretically say, well, the landscaping here in the revised plan doesn't work. And it doesn't work because we don't like the density, I don't like the footprint, because you haven't left enough room for landscaping. I mean, that's why I asked Susan if the landscaping footprint, let's call it that way, the landscaping footprint that the HRC already approved flips to this one almost exactly. Otherwise, the footprint changes. I don't see how it doesn't.
May I add something real quick?
Sure, and then I don't mean to get, I'm going down to
Okay.
too far into the weeds here, but go ahead, or the trees.
No. Everything, I like what you addressed because.
Well, don't go too far down that road,
No.
I've been in front of a lot of judges where you hear it going on a whack, man, that guy's thinking something else, so go ahead.
No, I just want to make the point that the entire historical aesthetics would be changed with the amount of vehicles and the overall picture. And this is what we're here for today, a special use permit only approval, okay? I understand, that this is what's on the agenda and this is what we're fighting. With an approval of this building plan as proposed and as already approved, it would be detrimental for the future of the historic district as it is, because any developer could come in, or private homeowner for that matter of fact, tear down a building in bad repair, tear out the landscaping, and build something new and in non-prior existence to this date. And this is exactly the point. There are apartment and multifamily
Okay, Alex,
dwellings.
so then you got to help go back to what Supervisor Abad said. I mean, because the Historic Commission already approved 2 duplexes,
Yes.
and they approved a landscaping plan. They approved a parking plan, and the parking was 16, and so this
No.
one.
No, the parking was for 8 vehicles, suitable for 2 duplex units.
Right, and so this one's got,
That was approved.
okay. Because I guess, and I'll go to Jim in half a second here, Jim, just, I don't know that it's going to carry the day to argue that it's not in conformance with, that it's going to damage the historic resource district if I've already got some evidence that, duplexes can go on there. And I'm also sensitive to the fact, I will tell you, I'm a little concerned that it comes up here before it goes to HRC. Because I don't, people have a right to not be whipsawed between different government entities that have the same thing, and I'm sensitive to that. So, if there's a way where I can put it to bed without having people have to go through that one way or the other, I'm going to go there. But I'm a little concerned about that, but let me ruminate about that. Supervisor Shirk, I'm sorry to jump in your request there.
The first plan that was submitted, HRC approved, which was 1 building with 8 parking spots, and then there was another building with 8 parking spots, correct?
No, it was also 2 buildings, similar to scale of the today proposed project. And today's project is truly identical or very similar than the approved project of 2 duplex units. However, they just reduced the number of, or added the number of dwelling spaces. Instead of a 2-bedroom unit, they would offer 1-bedroom units.
Okay, bear with me just for 1 second. The first drawings that were approved, how many structures are there and how many parking spots were there?
Are you talking about the duplexes? The
Approved.
duplexes that are currently approved, is that
No,
right?
previously. What was previously approved by the HRC?
A duplex with,
With how many spots?
No.
Parking?
It was 2 fourplexes with 16 parking spots.
right, okay, in 2011, it was 2 fourplexes with 16 parking spaces. That was appealed and then sent back to the Planning Commission. So that was essentially, the approval was overturned. What the
But wait.
current,
HRC approved it.
Yes.
Okay.
And Planning Commission.
Okay. So what is different from, basically, what is different from that first approval and then this structure? What is the big difference we're looking at here?
This is the first approval site plan with 16 parking spaces and open
Okay,
space.
and let me interject something. And did you approve this plan? Or your,
No, I did not approve this plan. This
Okay.
was the initial appeal.
okay,
However, I want to enumerate that we came to an agreement. Mr. Herman Bauer understood and took the recommendations given by this Board of Supervisors in 2012 to reduce his scaling and the amount of buildings, or, yes, the scale to a 2-duplex project. And that was approved and agreed upon with everyone. We wouldn't be here today if Mr. Bauer had not chosen to first do something illegal by cutting down these trees he had, specifically showed in his plans. And they were at the time still on city property. So what you see today is basically the same concern, or our concern today is the same as within this project. We don't mind the construction of 2 duplex units with the appropriate parking spots required of 8. This would actually change city ordinances to only require 1.5 parking spaces per unit, and therefore alter future development within the historic district, if not the entire city.
thank you, and thank you, staff.
Alex, you've been up there a long time. I don't mean to.
Yes, no, kick me out.
No, I'm not kicking you out, but I know what it's like to stand up there and.
I do have a co-appellant who would also like to speak.
Sure,
but,
go. Let's hear him.
Thank you so much.
Hello, I'm Basil Slaughter. I live at 314 West Ann Street.
Good afternoon,
Also
Basil.
the owner of that property. And I wanted to speak on a couple of issues pertaining the the application of the special use permit. And my main concerns are, like in question 2, section D, states that the impact on pedestrian and vehicular traffic will be minimal, but also states that, yes, there will be an increase in traffic due to the increased density in the area. Considering the 8 units, 2 occupants per unit, that amount more than doubles the amount of people living in that neighborhood effectively. And so I don't see how that can be called a minimal impact.
So let me ask you, and go back to one of these things, because what Alex just said was your concern, his major concern is the parking. Instead of, the Planning Commission approved 1.5 parking places, and the code calls 2. Lee will be first to correct me. It says that they have discretion to change that, and I understand that and agree with that. But here's my question to you. The neighbors agreed with the 2 duplexes. Right?
Well, Alex has.
Okay.
I haven't.
Okay, all right. That's.
And the Board of Supervisors.
And the board, okay. Two duplexes with 16 places, 8 parking, and that's been through the HRC as well. So this unit has got, 4 more cars, 4 more parking places, but that's it. In terms of really what we're getting at here is the addition of 4 cars, because and a little bit of the density issue there, but it's 4 cars, that's what we're talking about. Or am I missing something here?
All right, well, that's where I'm going next.
Okay, go, I'm sorry, go, you got it.
All right.
We got to make the record here, so we'll get it all straightened out, don't worry, okay.
Yes, and Section I of the special use permit application states that all required parking is on site. And, you know, considering 2 residents per unit, we can realistically plan on 2 vehicles per unit, which is the standard building code in Carson City. In total, 16 cars with only 12 spaces provided on site. According to the existing plan, there is only, you know, I can only see 2 street parking spaces on Ann Street in front of the complex. And there, you know, that still leaves a couple of cars unaccounted for, you know, for where would they park? And, you know, from what I've seen, the parking on Minnesota Street is already being utilized, you know, by the residents in that area, in that fourplex that's over there. And, you know, I don't believe that there's parking available on Division Street. And also, you know, I'm concerned that the 3 vehicles that park on Division Street there, I mean, those will be required to back out onto Division Street, you know, which is the main thoroughfare through the district there. And, you know, creating further congestion. And, I believe that, you know, this whole project is out of scale to the size of the lot they're proposing it on. And, you know, I think the special use permit should be rescinded.
Thanks, Basil, thanks. Okay. Oh, you got a question? Go, question, I'm sorry. Go.
Lee or Susan, is it not permissible to do double deep garages? You see those in residential applications all the time. How does that impact the open space in terms of square footage availability? Is that a possibility?
We have seen it in the past, however, we don't count the second space towards the allowed parking.
Thank you, Basil. Okay.
All right.
You bet.
Thank you.
All right. Who's next? Come on. Hi.
How are you? I'm Brenda Dahlquist. I'm the one who bought the house on the corner at 801 North Minnesota and was not notified. Of course, I did get my tax bill, though, but didn't get notified about the project. So,
Brenda, hang on one second, because you reminded me of a question. I mean, I don't, have we crossed that legal bridge? Has anybody done that?
they sent me a really nice letter.
I mean, I need to ask them for the record here, though. Is the noticing been done properly, or do we have an issue on noticing?
Joe Ward from the DA's office. The noticing has been pursuant to the statutes. A list is provided to planning from the assessor's office. And based on the list that was provided, I understand the mailings went out to every address on the list. Mr. Plummel could probably address a little bit more as to maybe the lag in time with the assessor's office in getting that list accurate.
I don't need to have that. I just want to know if it's,
It is.
the DA weighs in on the legality of where we are. I mean, because if they don't, then we've got a different issue here.
The notice was in accordance with statute.
All right, Brenda, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, when I purchased the house, I was not aware of this, and I purchased the house as a single-family homeowner. So then this comes about, and of course, I find out about it, after the fact. But that's all here and there. I just want to raise a few other points. Basically, I hate to read this off here, but in addition to a project adhering to code and gain approval, there's also a community obligation to proper planning. And we do have a 2005-2006 master plan. And in part of that, one of the big things in that master plan, and it was in the mixed-use residential portion of the master plan, fulfill the following, and this is Chapter 6, livable neighborhoods and activity centers. My problem isn't so much with the project, but we're going from 2 bedrooms to 4 two-bedroom properties to 8 one-bedroom properties. So build it and they will come. What are we building this for in this community? We're building this for possibly these are 600 to 800 square foot homes. Are we building this for Section 8? Is that what's going to be coming in here into my neighborhood? I have a 20-year-old daughter that stays home alone at night from time to time. That's what my concern is here. So it says, here's some of the principles for achieving livable neighborhoods and activity centers. Focus on increasing the quality of development citywide. Is this going to increase the development citywide? We just approved a 0.5% tax, and we're going to redo the whole downtown, which is right there. This is, to me, is another Silver Queen type of a project. Are these going to be weeklies? Is that what this is going to be? I don't want to live next door to that. You don't want that next door to you. None of you guys do. I don't mind having 2 duplexes there. We have horrible parking. To get into my own backyard, I had to go to 3 businesses to have the parking moved during the day so I could get into my backyard. This is going to present, you've got 8 families, possibly. Hopefully they're just a couple. Hopefully they don't have a child, but they may in a 1-bedroom. Is that what we want here? I don't think so. So in my opinion, this is not increasing the quality. Encouraging infill and redevelopment that blends seamlessly with established areas of the city. Does this blend seamlessly? No, I don't feel that it does. It's an 8-plex. I'm a single family. Alex is a single family. We have a 6-plex across the street. Very nice people. They have tons of room. Then we have a duplex, a child care that's not in there anymore, and a couple of more duplexes. We've got a great dog park. But, it's going to get really crowded in there. I don't think that it blends seamlessly at all. Establishing a hierarchy of mixed-use activity centers. This is not mixed use, in my opinion. This is just, you're putting too many people in too small of a piece of dirt. Reestablishing downtown as a vibrant center for the community. No, how is this? Are these the people that are going to go walk downtown? Are they going to ride to work on their bicycles? This is a piece of property. You can ride to the state offices. You can go downtown and enjoy evening entertainment. Those are the people we want to encourage to move downtown. For lack of a better term, the yuppies come down. They're the ones who are going to go out and spend the money. We don't want the people working at the state to just drive into town and leave. We want them to come here and have a really cool, neat downtown place to live. I don't think a 1-bedroom, 600 square foot home is where they want to come live. I sell real estate and I just don't see it. Do we need affordable housing? Yes, but I think we need to be cognitive of our neighborhoods and put something out there where people want to come. Build it and they will come. You build a 1-bedroom, you're going to get that type of person. You build a 2-bedroom, you're going to get that type of person. What does downtown, what does the historical district want? And I think that's something that we've missed the whole boat here. Yes, they've got their plans, they've got their setbacks, they've got all of that. But have they really met what Carson City needs in a downtown historical district? And I guess that's my big point.
Thank you very much. Very well said. Very articulate. Okay, next. Doc, come on up.
Looks like Susan has something to say here.
Go.
I just wanted to clarify for the record that the first 2 people that spoke were the appellants. The rest from here on out is public comment.
Yeah, I think, and I'm aware that, but I think that they're neighbors, so, I mean.
I do appreciate that,
Okay.
and Susan and I appreciate the clarification. I realize we're very fortunate to be able to speak in front of all you today, so thank you. I'm Tom Gibbons. I've been in the community probably for as long as any of you have been here. I have a practice in the city that's located in the historic district. It's been in the historic district for close to 35 years. And if any of you are aware of what historic awards have been given, I've received them all. I believe, and this was brought to my attention, otherwise it would have been earned, I think we have a cart before the horse issue. I think the Historic Architectural Review Committee should have seen this first, because I'm concerned about the appearance and what it does to this historic district. Let me reference a note made in the Nevada appeal just recently. History defines us. If you poo-poo our historical roots, let us tell you that just about every visitor we've talked to in the past 2 weeks is here for the unique history. This is not the unique history. Past 2 weeks, they want to see them at the museums, the downtown corridor, the historic district. And we get lots of questions on being intrigued. People are here interested in train ride, BC, come here to look at the attractions, come down to spend, I mean, what we're trying to do for the entire corridor, this does not represent it. Now, if I look upset with probably some of you folks here, yes, I am. I'm not sure who I'm happy with nowadays. But this certainly doesn't represent this. I was notified yesterday, and if you take a look at my structure, and I've talked with an engineer and architectural review committee, this can be made to look significantly more historic. It can be made to qualify for the immediate neighbors here. But I think it would be a real shame to see it passed by this board, because I know what happens in the cart before the horse with this marijuana issue that was just passed. Now, maybe if you want to put a marijuana farm in this, you can. But I think we need a historically significant structure appearance to go on this site and to be blended with the neighbors that live and purchased homes in this neighborhood. Now, that may not make any difference to the Planning Commission. I know they're very code-oriented and very, but this is the reason I love this town, why I've chosen to live here and raised my family here for the last 45 years. And why I've seen the historical, when we were designated a district, this was not the concept this here. We're a national historic district. And I think you need to go back to the Historic Architectural Review Committee, take in all the comments from your neighbors, your immediate neighbors, and take that into account. This can be buildable. I'm an entrepreneur. I built my buildings in the historic district. I renovated them to look like they fit in that district. Thank you.
Peter?
Your Honor, Mr. Mayor, Supervisors, I live in the neighborhood. The last time I was before you was in 2011 when you denied the eight units that was there before, and I understood at the time that it was because the density of having 8 units on one half of small half of a city block was just too much, and that's why it was sent back. And so here we are again with 8 more units, and I missed all the steps in between. I didn't hear about it. I was lucky to be notified by Mr. Kirsch last night that this was coming up. And I spent 2 terms on the Historic Resource Committee, hearing all the matters that come there. And it's my experience that once the density is determined by the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission, the Historic Resource Committee will not touch the density issue at all. And when you touch the density issue, when you put 8 units on here, you end up having a lot more parking. You have a lot more asphalt. And I think the whole point of preserving the character of the western side of Carson City is to try to keep it from turning into a parking lot. That's it. Thank you. Questions?
So are we then, because the historic HRC has seen something like this with the exception of 4 parking places. That's the, if you just look at the cold issue of parking places, Peter, and what the HRC has seen, they've seen this plan with the exception of the 4 extra parking places. Is that what, that's what we're talking about?
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, so what you're saying then is that the 4, not to be facetious about, but the 4 extra parking places make this plan unsuitable for the historic district.
In my view, we had the 8 units denied by this board, and they went back, they got approval for 4 units, and that was approved, and they went all the way through it, and now they're back looking for 8 again. They're just trying to squeeze in 4 more
parking spaces. And 4 more parking spaces is, I mean, it's incremental. No single parking space or no group of 4 parking spaces is ever going to kill the district. But every time you add 4 more of them, there's that much more asphalt, and there's that much more traffic.
Okay, gotcha. All right, thanks, Peter. All right.
Peter, could you give us your last name, just so it gets on the
Smith,
record?
Peter Smith. I live at 1206 North Nevada Street.
All right.
Thank you.
I know we're going kind of astray from what would happen and what I want to be careful what we do. So any residents want to add anything additional? Marlene, you want to come up?
Hi, everybody. Well, I just came to this meeting, no intentions of saying anything, but I know Art worked with this group opposing this project before he passed away 2 years ago. That's Art Hannafin, as most of you know him. And I just want to say, if he was here today, he'd be up here, and I just want to be here in his place and just say, please give more thought to this project. And I, in my heart, believe it's wrong also, so.
Thank you, Marlene.
Nothing new to add.
No, it's okay.
Just speaking for Art.
All right, channeling Art, that's fine. Hey, hang on, we don't want to clap, okay? I mean, gotcha, okay. Come on up, well, one more, come on, and then I don't mean to, but, because we're going to take a break, let the applicant think about it, and then we'll come back and we're going to see where we go. And I apologize to the applicant for going long on here, but we're going to go.
I'll be very quick. My name is Tom Streckel. I'm a 32-year resident of Carson City and a homeowner in the historic district, living a mere 3 blocks from the proposed construction site. I had a prepared statement. I'm going to forego that because I think many of the comments have already been made. I will add one thing to my prepared statement, that hearing that saying that a proposal is similar to something that was looked at before and justifying it because it's similar is not the same as saying it's the same project as before. So I don't think you can make the leap and say by similarity justifies a proposal of something that had already been denied in the past. And I will just read my final paragraph for you and then sit down. I wrote, "If this proposal is approved and carries forward, it will demonstrate both to our community and to those outside that we have no memory, that we have no history, and eventually that we will have no heritage." Thank you.
Okay, Tom. All right. I think unless somebody has, on the appellant side, has something that hasn't been said, I think I'd like to take a break, and then we're going to hear from the applicant, so we'll be in recess for about 5 or 10 minutes here to call the chair, okay? We're in recess. Who's going to go? Anybody, you want to say anything? You don't want to say anything? Mr. Bauer, come on up. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Herman Bauer. I'm a developer, and I listened carefully to what Mr. Kirsch had to say. Unfortunately, I didn't quite catch all these paragraphs he was referring to. One thing which he emphasized again, I'm from out of town. Yes, I'm a developer from out of town, but I am paying taxes here. I have more property. And another item which really contributes nothing, but I'm also not the fast cash guy. We're buying this property for development and keep it for the future. That is our intention.
Let me ask you, and you can go where, say whatever you want to say here, but let me ask you, what was the motivation? I mean, it looks like you had the two duplexes approved, ready to roll. HRC approved the landscaping, everybody's done everything, it was ready to go, homeowners signed off on it. What's happening here today? Why
did we go to 4 units?
Yeah.
Very simple. There is no market for large units like 12, 13, 1,400 square feet. The market is for single units, single people, elderly people, people who don't have cars. And I have John Uhart with me who can speak to the market condition in that area based on other units. And the build something for which there's no market absolutely makes no sense. And that's why we decided keep the same footprint, same exterior elevation with one minor adjustment on N Street. We're adding a door. Nothing else has changed. And that was the reason why we decided to go to 4 units instead of 2.
There's additional parking, though, that's here.
Additional parking. We hired the traffic engineer, Mr. Sears.
I got you. I know that he'll be here and he'll say, but I mean, there's additional parking over and above what the HRC and the Planning Commission approved earlier on the last project.
Last project, 16 cars. This project, 12 cars.
Eight. The one that the HRC approved was 8. I mean, not that HRC has anything on the parking stuff here, and I got the jurisdiction issue, but it was 8. That was 8. Now we're at 12. So what I hear the residents saying is, you know, those 4 spaces make a difference.
It was, for those buildings, it was 16 cars.
He's talking about for the duplexes.
Pardon?
He's talking about for the duplexes.
For the duplexes, yes. Oh, for duplex, it was 8, excuse me. Now we have 12. I thought you talked about the very original project.
Okay, all right.
Okay, and I like Mr. Alafi, who came up from Newport today. I'd like you to listen to him. He's a traffic engineer.
Okay, go. I mean, I think how's your hand, okay? All right, come on.
You ask more questions for me first?
I don't think so. I think I got it.
Okay, all right.
Unless the board's got questions here. But I think I also got the parking issue going here, so. We've got your letter, and we read it as part of the packet, so.
Okay.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Cyrus Alavi.
I'm a professional engineer in the state of Nevada. I lived in northern Nevada for 16 years, and I'm very familiar with our area. And over this time, I did over 100 traffic engineering type reports, including many parking generation reports. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm here to answer any questions and have some comments to make as well.
Any questions? I think kind of understand. Go ahead. Any comments?
We were approached by Mr. Herman Bauer back in early, I believe, 2014 to put together a parking demand-supply study, something that we've done, or I have done in my professional life for 20-some years. And as part of this company, we've done over 100 in northern Nevada, something that we make a living doing so. So obviously, we did that, and out of that came our March 12, 2014 report. The way we go about these parking generation reports is, number one, always look at the city ordinance and regulations, and if necessary, talk with the planning division to see what their codes and regulations are. Like thousands of other cities around the country, agencies have realized, or cities have realized, that they cannot write the codes for every single type of development. I'll give you a very quick example, and I'm going to keep everything brief. Take the issue of warehousing. Over 90% of cities around the country have one code for warehousing. We get a lot of calls from developers of mini warehouses. And they say, we are in trouble. And I say, why? They say, well, they are asking us to put, I'm making this number up, 85 parking spaces for our little mini warehouse because the city does not have the proper code. Now, the issue with the warehousing, for example, is that under warehousing, if there's only one code, it can be a manufacturing warehousing where you have hundreds of employees, trucks coming in and out, or it can be a poor guy trying to build a small mini warehouse where people store their property once and then they take it all out one other time, and during those times they go on periodically and make a trip to put something there or take out. Similar to that example is what we see here. The notion that Mr. Kirsch made throughout this discussions today, and also in his letter, which is dated August 11, 2014, is that the traffic engineering report was not done properly or did not follow the city's rules, regulations, or ordinance. I am only going to talk about the facts and not the emotion. This is my first time talking with you. The fact is that that is just not a true statement. The reason why it's not a true statement is that actually your code, and this is out of Division 2 parking and loading, and I believe Susan also had it in her write-up, Section 2.2 says that if an accredited source, example, Institute of Transportation Engineers, ITE, provides an acceptable alternative to a parking standards in this division, the director may consider it as an alternative. So that statement has been put there to take care of an issues like warehousing versus mini warehousing. In our case, when we look at the city codes under residential uses, it asks for 2 spaces per dwelling unit, but it treats all single-family units detached the same as low-rise complexes, same as high-rise complexes, same as everything else. Basically, anybody under that roof, you get 2 units per dwelling. So when we compare that with ITE, which is basically the point of authority besides what the agencies have when it gets to transportation engineering rules, regulations, and codes, has 9 different land uses that identifies
how people live in a space. And for each one, they have provided a different parking, basically demand for the space. And low mid-rise apartment, which is our case here, is just one of them. And for those, they've gone to urban versus suburban. In our case, in urban, it talks about 1.2 parking spaces per unit. We have 8 units here. That comes to be 9.6. So from a traffic engineering point of view, 10 parking spaces per ITE is acceptable. So we presented that in our report to the planning division, and they had their own discussions. And they have decided that rather than using a 1.2, they want to go with 1.5, which is actually more conservative. Now, regarding the use of census data, something that came up in Mr. Kirsch's letter, and he repeated it again here today without reading or without mentioning the issues that I addressed in my letter. Number one, in state of Nevada under revised statute, if somebody comes to a board such as yourself to make a recommendation on engineering matters.
Hang on. I know where you're going with that,
right.
and
Okay,
but
it's
a little bit different here because there's kind of a different standard in terms of public testimony. So kind of just stay on the issue of the technical side of rather than whether somebody's got the authority or not. So,
all right. So I'm not going to debate the U.S. Census Bureau numbers for zip code 89703. Zip code 89703 covers the western side of Carson City. It has commercial real estate in there. It has residential real estate in there. It has housing in there. It is multi-uses. One of them can be a residential use. Now, to put all of these together and say that because there has been an increase in cars, all of a sudden, a 600 or to a 800 plus unit square feet unit has to go, the parking has to increase with the same rate as the U.S. Census Bureau is really not how we as traffic engineers do our business. We go back to the codes that we have on Institute of Transportation Engineers manual, or the city's rules and regulations or ordinances, if they are specific enough to basically make those recommendations.
Got it. Questions, board? Anybody? No.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. I was talking to Mr. Brenneman back there. Okay. Anything else on the applicant side? John, anything? One? Or Herman? Either one. Yeah. Come on.
I'm not sure why why the tree issue came up again. I thought
why the what issue?
The tree issue, the tree removal of trees. I thought that was all settled. However, I want to say again, our original demolition drawing showed removal of the trees. Unfortunately, an error was made in the architectural drawings, which finally were submitted, showed the trees to remain. However, nevertheless, these trees were old, they were deceased. The arborist told us they have to come out, and they sure wouldn't fit in the landscaping we envision. If you want to, I have pictures here of the trees. I'm glad to show it here again to remind
that's
you.
okay. I think, and I don't mean to speak for everybody else here, and I certainly can't, but to me, the fact that the HRC made a decision in October of 2013 about this project when it had the duplexes, had the landscaping plan in front of it, that kind of put behind it the tree issues. But otherwise, because if it didn't, they wouldn't have gone down that road of approving it. So
anyway, that's what I thought, but it came up again. Now, do you want to have John speak to the...
No, he doesn't have to. I'm just saying, because if you're done, I want to just kind of get a sense of where we're going here, then we'll see what happens here, okay?
Well, the planning department made a very comprehensive report, and I know there's been plenty of time on it, but if there's any, we agree with everything to say. If you have any questions, we're here to answer them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Got it, Herman, okay. All right. I don't know if there's much to rebut there other than what we have, so here's, if the board goes along with this, here's a proposal for you. One more time, is it, you know, what I'm going to ask is that the applicant and Mr. Slaughter and Mr. Kirsch get together and see if they can solve this. Mr. Drews back there was on the Historic Resources Commission, has agreed to give his analysis. If that works, I'm going to give you till the first meeting in November to come up with a solution, and if you can't, we're going to come back here and make a decision. And so that nobody gets an idea of what the decision, I don't even know what that decision is going to be, but I will tell you that, you know, sitting in the middle here, I don't know which way that would go. So if somebody thinks that they've got an edge, I don't know. But if that's okay with the board, what I'm going to suggest is the applicant get together with the two appellants. Mr. Drews has agreed to give his time, see if you can get it solved. We'll bring it back here the first meeting in November, and we don't need to hear any more. We'll just make a decision. If not, if you don't want to do that, you want to make a decision today, you feel free. So go.
Well, I think it's a great idea, Mayor. The only thing I would like to add to that is somebody from the HRC be involved in the discussion, because we need to have them aboard as well. That's my opinion, so.
Yeah, that's why Mike's he's been on the chair of that. But anyway, go ahead, John.
This has been through the Planning Commission. It's been here before a long time ago. I don't know. If they want to move it forward, if they ask for, if the property owner asks for a discussion, then I would say fine. We ought to accede to his demands. Short of that, I think we ought to make a decision and just move this thing forward, right or wrong, up or down. People like us, people don't like us. It's what we're here for.
If the applicant and the appellants agree to your proposal, then I'll go along with it. However, I got to say that there's two different issues here, and we've spent most of the last hour and 45 minutes talking about one that we don't really have jurisdiction over today, and we spent very little time talking about the one that we do have jurisdiction over today. And I haven't seen any real findings to deny that, the issue that's in front of us here today. So I will go along with your proposal, Mayor, if the applicant and the appellants are agreeable to it.
You guys want to think about it for 2 seconds while we stand on recess, or you want to make a decision? Now you think you've heard?
I already did.
Okay.
I don't think it's going to work.
All
I
right.
think we need a decision now. We had this now for 4 years. Mr. Kirsch made very clear from the outset that whatever's going to be built, he will oppose it. And I don't have any more time now to spend on it.
All right.
And if I don't get a favorable decision today, so be it.
Okay. All right, I got you. Understood. All right. We're here then. Either discuss or make a motion. Motion's in order.
I move to uphold the Planning Commission's decision to allow multifamily dwelling units on property zoned residential office located at 812 North Division Street, APN 001-191-06, based upon the findings for approval and with the recommendations, conditions contained within the staff report to the Planning Commission.
There's a motion and second. Discussion.
Yes.
Discussion's in order.
Again, we spent most of our time talking about issues that we're not here to talk about today, and unfortunately what that means is I think we're all going to be back into this room with an appeal from the HRC. So we're only going to address the issue that's in front of us today, which is the special use permit, and I don't see anything in the report that tells me that they haven't met with all the conditions to get that special use permit.
And my comment is, I'm concerned in one respect, and that is that density, Brad's very right, is what we have to decide on today. And they have conformed, although what was approved was 8 parking spots for 2 buildings at our last go-round with this. And we're up to 12. And so that part is disturbing, but the positive side of that is the open space that was provided is excellent. And I do have to say that the single family, the couple, or single person or the couple, that sort of thing, it does appeal to that sort of housing. I do feel that the exteriors need to have more of a historic look to them. I don't think we're there yet. But I know we also don't have the pretty renderings of this either, and that's part of the Historic Resource Commission's job, is to take a look at that and to take a look at the landscaping.
The Planning Commission is a group of citizens that were appointed to the Planning Commission to make these decisions. From the record, it shows that they heard a lot of testimony. They evaluated that testimony in a rational manner, giving the full regard to the rights of each party. They came up with a decision, and I think that we need to follow their decision if at all possible. Secondly, when I first came here in 1987, we had an office at 444 West Washington, and it's right behind this piece of property. And then that piece of property went from an accounting office to, at one time, it was a nursing home. This is, that area, as far as I am concerned, that area is more commercial, more office than it is residential. But that's just because of my experience when I first came to Carson City.
I think there were some thought-provoking thoughts brought forward at the podium. The indication of how many people signed a petition, the interest of the community as to where this piece of property will go. I understand that. Unfortunately, we're here today, and we can only vote on what planning brought to us, which is a special use permit. That's all we're here to vote on. My heart goes out to you. I understand the issues you brought forward, but we're not here to look at that. We're here to look at the special use permit. I would have preferred this went to the Historic Society before it came to us, but that's not the way this has turned out either. We have no alternative but to evaluate why we're here on this agenda item, and that is for the special use permit, and that's what we're voting on. And you have to put all the emotions aside and look at the issue, and that's what's before us today. So in that respect, I will be voting in favor of this because that's why we're here today.
I got to tell you, I understand the arguments. I am concerned about the fact that, I got all the arguments. I'm concerned that, there was an agreement made. Everybody's in line. Now we're coming back and changing the parking. I agree that the density hasn't changed, and I agree that, that there's, so I'll be voting no. But so on the motion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? No.
3-2.
3-2. All right. Motion passes 3-2. All right. That's it. We'll now take up medical marijuana. And as we take this up, I want to remind folks that, I hear that what we're doing here today has its genesis in the Nevada Constitution, which was the subject of 2 votes of the Nevada citizenry. And that constitutional provision requires the legislature to make laws with respect to medical marijuana. That's what we're doing here today. So that's where we are. I know that myself, I probably have others, if it wasn't for a constitutional amendment, would have a different approach. All right. So on the proposed ordinance, everybody had a chance to read the ordinance? Got the fees in it that Solomon Bunkowski fixed last time. Anybody, any public comment on it? Anybody want to weigh in? Okay. Board, ready to go.
I have a question first.
Question.
For Lee and Susan. On page 9, under item 5, confidential information. So we're going to, if you back up just a minute, to under 4A, we're going to get the complete and accurate copy of the application and all accompanying documents filed with the Division of Public and Behavioral Health. Thank you for that, because I did ask for that. My purpose in asking for that is that I had several requests that the public be aware of who the owners of the MMEs were. But under item 5, that information would be kept confidential. So what I'm wondering is there a way that the application, the full application, can be kept confidential, but anyone that has an ownership interest of more than 5% in an MME, that information can be made public per the request of several constituents?
While you make that decision, I think, I know it's late and we've been going a long time today, and I overlooked. I think I want to make a disclosure, the same that I made when we talked about on the business impact statement. I think Supervisor Bunkowski, and it's not a light oversight, but I have members of my law firm who represent medical marijuana clients. I don't know that they're in Carson City here, but I want there's a perception that could influence my decision. However, this the ordinance that we're talking about here is one of general applicability, and I believe that according to the law, and I don't have it in front of me, but it's on the record in my last disclosure, that I should be able to vote, and I intend to vote. So.
And I have the same verbatim disclosure with the exception that I own a real estate company here in Carson City and have agents in my office that do represent MME applicants around the state. All the rest of the disclosure is on the record from previous meetings and is along the same lines as the mayor's. So I do intend to discuss and vote on this issue.
All right. I apologize to everyone for making an oversight there, okay? But I don't think we discussed anything substantive before we got there. All right.
Can I just make a comment?
Comments in order.
I just want to comment and commend staff on it was brought in all of our discussions that a hold harmless agreement be looked at, and that is included under item 2B of this document, and so I just want to draw attention to that.
Actually, and while we're making comments, and, given the topic and the position of where this issue is statewide and everything else, I thought that the ordinance was very well drafted in terms of covering all the different bases. It was clear and everything else, so, okay. All right, did you get an answer to your question?
Yeah.
Joe Ward from the DA's office. I didn't catch all of the comments made by the board, but would a non-substantive fix be to simply say as required by law, and then or consistent with NRS 453A, or basically with the parameters as set by NRS 453A.
I don't have that in front of me, so I don't know if that allows for the publication of ownership interest.
I believe that the concern may have been financial information. And you're addressing perhaps a threshold of 5% ownership interest, and then disclose simply disclose those with an ownership interest in excess of 5%.
Maybe a better question is, in the business licensing process, if it's an LLC or a corporation, do you require the names of the principals as part of that application?
We require the name of the officers, or at the minimum, one officer of the LLC or the corporation, but not necessarily all of the parties.
Do we have the ability to require the owners, anybody with an ownership interest in that entity, whether it's an LLC or a partnership or a corporation? Because then we can just handle it through the business license process and not change the ordinance.
Yeah, I don't think that we're specific enough in the ordinance right now. I would recommend, if you want to go that route, then that we put a separate item under application contents in this revision we're proposing that says ownership to be provide all ownership in excess of, you said it was 5%, correct? To be provided, that will be made available to the public, and then that way it's covered. I think the confidential information part, you know, I'm not certain that the state intended for the ownership to be a part of that or not, but from our standpoint, I think we're more concerned about the proprietary information and social security numbers and financial information that really, truly would be more confidential.
Understood. And in Southern Nevada, they are making it ownership interest public, is part of the public process. So if we do make that change that Susan just suggested, is that going to require a second first reading?
No, I don't believe that that's substantive. I mean, I think you're staying within the boundaries, I believe, of this ordinance. Just a minor modification.
Okay, then that works for me. So do you have suggested language, or do you want me to just, if I make the motion, do you want me to just reference per our discussion here today?
I think, per our discussion, is that, or do you want him to make language recommendations? Because I think I can put it together based on our discussion. I'm comfortable that I understand what you're saying.
You want it, Jim, you're up. You want it specified before we do that?
Well, I don't know why we have to draw the line to say anybody with over 5%. Or why aren't we just listing everyone? Why does it have to be 5%? Where does that number come from?
Because it could be a corporation that has hundreds or more.
Yeah, if we're,
So I think that's I think that's the intent of that. It gets the people who own such a small fraction of it.
So
you
take
could have
a
100
public-
people, you could have 95 people own 44% of it, and you would never know anybody. I mean, if it's our ordinance, I think we can write it any way we want, obviously. That's what we're doing now. So why do we have to draw and say anything over 5%? Why don't we just list everyone?
Well, since I threw the number out there, typically it's because of accumulated voting interest. So people with less than 5% or 5% of less voting rights typically are considered inconsequential. So that's where I picked the number. I'm not arguing for or against it. I'm just telling you where I picked the number from.
Yeah, I understand that, but I'm not interested in who has voting rights. I'm interested in who owns it. As a public entity, I think they should at least disclose who owns it. I don't think it's a big deal.
So I think that where Supervisor Bunkowski is going with this is that if for some reason, let's say, for example, there is an investment partner that is a publicly traded company that has hundreds of thousands of stockholders, it would be very difficult for them to provide that list, because essentially every stockholder would have ownership in the corporation that has ownership in this. And I'm not saying that would happen, but that's kind of, you know, the worst case scenario you'd be looking at if you said all owners.
Well, and on Susan's point, it gets into at what date, at what time on that date, that sort of thing, when you have rapidly trading stocks, et cetera. What we're interested in is the controlling management. We're not interested in the investing management, at least I'm not. I want to know who's going to be making the decision of the business. So I think a way of knowing who's making the decisions in the business is what I'm really looking for there, that type of ownership.
So we have some suggested language, actually. Under item number 4, it says, each application for a medical marijuana establishment business license shall include, and we'll add an item that says, item F, the names of all owners with at least a 5% interest in the business with percentage of each person's ownership listed.
That satisfies me, yes.
Anybody else?
Well, if you want other options versus a percentage, you can also do the top 99% ownership. I own 10, you own 12. We get listed. I own 1/2 or 1/10 of 1%. I don't get listed.
I'm okay with where we are. All right, public comment, anybody want to weigh in? Board? Supervisor Binkowski, motion's in order.
Bill number is 115.
115? I move to introduce on first reading Bill number 115, an ordinance amending the Carson City Municipal Code Title IV, Licenses and Business Regulations, Chapter 4.04, Business License, Section 4.04.005, Definitions, by adding definitions for medical marijuana establishments, Sections 4.04.020, 4.04.031, and 4.04.040, by adding fees for medical marijuana establishments and exempting medical marijuana establishments from certain fees, and adding a new section 4.04.120 entitled Medical Marijuana Establishments, Application for License and Additional Regulations, to provide additional requirements for medical marijuana establishment business licenses and other matters properly related thereto as amended on item 4F per our discussions and as read into the record.
Motion and second on the motion discussion. Supervisor Shirk.
As this went through the process, I have voted against this, and I stress that other communities are charging a flat fee for their business license and obtaining a percentage, such as 2%, and from the sale. And now that, if we had that, as I recommended at the earlier board meeting, to have the flat fee plus a percentage, and if we did that, then we could actually have the funding to buy bonding to buy Horse Creek Ranch. But that being said, I know this board won't go for a percentage, but I will propose it again. I'm sorry? Do you want?
No, no, go ahead.
Okay, when I have the microphone,
Yeah,
when you talk, no,
Yeah.
I'm talking now.
I apologize, Jim, I should have made a comment. It wasn't directed at you.
Thank you. And again, this board has repeatedly stood back and said no to this percentage when other communities are doing it. Other communities have opted out of the medical marijuana. We are going to be influenced by individuals coming to our community to obtain this, which is fine. That's part of it. But we should look at the percentage that we're losing and the money we're losing. So again, I ask that this board reconsider and put the percentage back in as other communities have as well. Thank you.
On the motion, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay?
Nay.
Okay. Motion carries 4-1. All right. We're now concluding public comment. Anybody? I don't see any. There will be a open house or ribbon cutting at the airport at 5:30. I think so. If you want to come out and hear the roar of an airplane engine, come on out, okay? Anything else to come before us? If not, we're adjourned.